Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio and to our Shabbat program this evening. We have a full cast of characters. Last week you had Kirk and Larry, and what I've heard and read did a great job. I was under the weather last Friday. I not only couldn't talk, I was afraid even to fall asleep at night because my throat had swollen to the point that I was concerned that I would suffocate during the night. I'm sure that those who have suffered from really severe bouts of asthma and other kinds of respiratory things have been in that position. It isn't a lot of fun, but I had a really bad bacterial infection in my throat and couldn't talk and could barely breathe for several days. But feeling fine now. Antibiotics are a good thing.
Glad you're better.
Yes, thank you. Feeling good. Hello, Larry.
Hey. Good to hear you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
that sounds like it's a pretty rough bout there.
It was not fun. Yeah, it was the hardest part of it. With the pain of course, of having the throat that swollen is no fun. But I could not sleep. Just absolutely. I don't know if I was too paranoid to fall asleep, thinking, I'm going to suffocate here, or it just wasn't possible.
It's probably, that's just a reflex almost. I've been something like that a couple of times, and it's just, your body well enough to know that it's just an impossible task. That's all.
It
because you are going to start starving for air, and you know it.
Yeah, and you know it. Yeah, you can barely breathe as it is. Kirk,
Yes, sir.
I was able to print everything that you wrote. I really admire your technical skills here with your handwriting. But your handwriting is so good.
It's really not for public, for public observation.
Yeah, your handwriting is so good. It's actually, in your case, it's actually better than printing. What I'm referring to here is that Kirk, and I would encourage you, Kirk, if you haven't already, to send this off to both Christy and to James, if you could, so that they can post what you have done on their sites for those that are interested in reading along with you. Because as I was reading it this evening after I got back from an early dinner, that's why I almost missed the show. I was so mesmerized. I had thought, quite honestly, that the Exodus comparisons that you had found from that old manuscript, and the old manuscript, is it iPower? It's really close to that, but it's what's it? ePora. Okay. That old manuscript.
Who knows? But yeah.
Yeah, that old manuscript. My first thing is, okay, when somebody comes up with this, even if it's my buddy Kirk, my tendency is not to believe it's not true. Yeah,
okay.
You questioned what I write in my translations, and I encourage you to do so. So there's nothing wrong with me questioning it. And of course, and the first thing, by the way, that I questioned was the person who first used it to make the connections with the Exodus. He's a genuine nutcase. But the fact of the matter is that the document exists, and you've quoted it correctly. It is completely translated. It's available for anyone to read. And when you began with it, and we did the first observation show, I was pretty much blown away with how consistent that text is with the text of Exodus. Written from an entirely different perspective, of course, but chronicling the same events.
Yes.
And we made our way through, I think, the first 9 plagues in that first show.
Right.
And every one of them is described. Well, not every one of them. There's 3 of them that are not described in the iPor text.
Some of it,
and those are the 3.
So we don't have everything in iPor.
Yeah, and those are the 3 that the magicians of the Pharaoh were also able to perform, making a bad situation worse. So they would be the 3.
Conveniently missing, perhaps.
Yeah, the 3 that this whole text is written by the priests of the Pharaoh. So those were conveniently, and you can see, okay, I can see why they didn't mention those. But then when you start to talk about what is written in various places, in many places, really about the aftermath of the ninth plague and what happened to Egypt thereafter. I mean, it's just chilling. I mean, the hair stands up on your on the back of your neck, on your arms, and so as I was engrossed in reading it, what I tease people, I said, hey, we can do either one here. You're prepared to present that. I'm prepared to jump back into to Zion. I'm prepared to be a narrator for walking you through the rest of it. But more I read it, Kirk, I really think that it deserves really a lot of preparation and focused time, and I think for us to pursue it more, I think you need to send a copy off to Larry, to James. We all need to read it through, think about it, and then and do it justice, because
it's a lot of material.
It is a lot of material.
I'm a great historian or something. I just found the stuff when I was very young, and I've had it for years, and I've read it for years. And we already sent them a copy, apparently. Did y'all get a copy?
Good. Yes, I have a copy.
All right.
I have not looked at my email, honestly.
Okay. They should be there, though. I think she sent them both.
Okay, so why don't we postpone that? Just because it's so dadgone meaty, and it is. If it were a prophecy akin to Yahowah predicting that America will be the cause of thinning Israel at the waist, and all the events that are going to occur in our future, including the demise of Syria and the fall of Damascus, we would devote an enormous amount of time to it, and we would all think about it, hear what Yahowah had to say, analyze every word, and be prepared to give it its due justice. But this, in my view, is a affirmation of historical prophecy, which everyone that is enlightened, the scholars, have all said did not happen.
Right.
And even in analyzing this text, they throw it away and say, just because there's a mention of the rivers turning to blood, there are those who want to compare it to the Exodus, but there's no comparison. That's what you read on Wikipedia.
Of course.
But the fact of the matter is, there isn't one comparison. There's like 50 direct quotes from every last detail, and it's not the only source.
No, not at all. There's about 7 or 8 that I just mentioned, and there's more than that. I got overwhelmed after a while on how much more stuff can I look up.
I never did. I didn't get a copy of that. I did not get a copy of it. I just checked.
Okay,
we'll make sure you get one, and we're going to
I'll forward
also
it over
sure.
to you right now.
And JB, do you mind posting it on your site so that those who want
I'm actually working on that right before the show, so it should be up by the
Yahowah Bereth site, so that those who want to read it, we can all be better prepared, and we'll be devoted to it, because this story has some really profound implications that we can all gain from understanding, and then it parlays into the Amalekites, and the story that I want us to be thinking about there is that Yahowah specifically asked the Israelites to hate them, to despise them to the point that they were willing to wipe them out, and they didn't do so. They didn't trust Yahowah enough to do what was right in this regard. And the consequence of that would plague them for 400 years, and plague the people of the entire region for 400 years.
Yeah, even more so, the whole dadgum area. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it would continue.
Well, that's kind of a consequence of deciding not to listen to somebody who's already seen the future, isn't it? I mean, really.
Correct. Exactly, and it ultimately became the pagan, the hideous, violent, demeaning pagan religion that was plagiarized from ancient Arab lore to become Islam is a direct derivative of the Amalekites. So it didn't just plague the region for 400 years thereafter, it's plagued the entire world for the last 1,400 years. So there is a tremendous consequence of not knowing what to hate and of hating insufficiently to be wholly intolerant of these kinds of cultural phenomenon that are so malignant, so hostile to life.
Oh yeah, and it's actually gotten worse in the West, in all the West.
Yes.
As an example, let's take this Islamic attack here a few days ago over in London, and the answer were for these idiots in charge to say we all stand together in solidarity.
Yeah.
What?
And the first
kind of an answer is that?
For the first 2 days, you could not get
strife.
the name. You couldn't get the name of the perpetrator because it was obviously Islamic. When you can't get the name of the perpetrator, it means it's Islamic. There was no mention of the cause for 2 days. They said it was a derivative of a lone wolf with ties to international terrorism. And even the commentators later, when it was obviously a Muslim acting on behalf of Islam, they would go so far as to say, we will not, respond against immigration or freedom or our values of multiculturalism and acceptance because of this lone individual. And that's why women are abused and sold as sex slaves, and why 99% of acts of terrorism are perpetrated. When you are merciful towards, compassionate towards, accepting of, tolerant of evil, the likes of Islam, that is responsible for the utter debasement of nearly 1 billion women and sexual slavery and mass murder and 99% of the world's terrorist acts, then you are a disgraceful, perverted, immoral, ignorant, and irrational individual.
Well, London is a beautiful example of multiculturalism, isn't it? I mean, what they really have is they've got the elite, and then they're surrounded by these quadrants of places nobody can go to, like Western London. They call it London Stand for a reason. It's the Pakis. Right. Then you got the Syrian neighborhoods, right? And then over on the other side you got the Somalian neighborhoods, and in between you got, I forget what they are, but they're like Arabic, and they all hate each other.
My wife.
I mean, they're all everyone's standing in solidarity. Well, they all hate each other, and collectively they all hate the English. It's an insane possibility, really.
My wife has been bugging me for years to go on one of these river cruises in Europe. And her best friend just came back from our third or fourth of these river cruises, and was horrified by the experience. And
really?
What she said is that in all of her prior river cruises, on every day, there were land excursions, and you went out and you explored the local area. So this time they didn't let them off the boat. They said because of what's happened in these areas with immigration, it's no longer safe. We will no longer accept the liability. There are no more shore excursions.
Well, they've got 83 Sharia active courts in London. 83 throughout these neighborhoods. It's an insane possibility. And see, these are the consequences, and this is, I'm glad we're talking about this too, because these are the consequences of everybody just deciding to blow off Yahowah. Religion, in general, is a consequence of these things.
Right.
What we are discussing and I really want to get this out here for people that are new. What we're discussing now is reality.
Yes.
Reality. We're talking about words that were left out there for us to pay attention to, and they're backed by science, they're backed by history, which is what I assume we're talking about with this stuff that Kirk has. Is that right? And the whole way through it, instead of having what we're looking at are extant, meaning you can't get anything older, extant breakdowns of Hebrew words which is as close to Yahweh's words as any of us has ever seen, and none of them are religious if you're reading them.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the consequence of tolerating, which is political correctness and social or secular humanism, their primary agenda, of tolerating multiculturalism and of accepting things like Islam is devastating. And so the entire value of there's two values of Kirk's study. The first is that Yahweh was very explicit in using both the verb bo and the verb haya to tell us that the primary test to determine whether or not you can conclude that a letter or a book or a revelation is from him or not is whether or not it is accurate, not in just what he is predicting will occur, but on what he has said has occurred. And so there's a lot of us that, and I was guilty of this for a long time myself, who make the mistake of looking at prophecy from an English mindset, English meaning the language of English, where there's past, present, and future. Yes. And prophecy is defined as predictions of the future. But that's not how Yahweh outlines his test. He says that we can validate whether or not he has said something if what he has revealed is true throughout time. If what he said has happened, is happening, and will happen are all 100% accurate, then we can use the historical proof and the prophetic proofs to conclude reasonably and rationally that he has inspired, therefore authored, what we are reading, and therefore not only can we trust it, but it's vital to our very survival. And so by going through the affirmations of the Exodus and then of the Amalekites, the first thing we gain is yet another amongst, so there's been hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of affirmations that we can trust the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And so this is the 555th. But this is a really good one. And it's worth it because every brick that we can set into this wall not only increases our confidence in Yahweh and his revelation all the more, and that becomes passion as we share it with others. But it also, when shared with others, if anybody is listening that is open-minded, interested in knowing who God is and how we can come to know him, and is rational, then they are going to come to trust the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and therefore come to know Yahweh. So it's really important from that point of view. His history is really important because every prophecy that Yahweh gives, there are lessons to be learned. And while the entire Exodus experience is filled with lessons, the Amalekite experience of the children of Israel not listening to God and not ridding them from the land had horrible consequences. You know, it's like what I used as the example of the Nazis. If you were God and knew for certain in the 1920s who were going to be the leaders of Nazism, and that collectively they would conspire to a war that would kill 55 million innocent people, and you could instead eliminate 5,000 people, extinguish the lives prematurely of 5,000 people, knowing for certain what they were going to do, would you exterminate the 5,000 most egregious perpetrators of Nazism, and thus the Second World War, to spare the lives of 55 million innocent people?
Well, that's a rhetorical question. Sure.
Yeah, I would. Absolutely. Well, the story of the Amalekites is exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
Yes.
But the difference is that while with the Amalekites, Yahweh told the children of Israel, you need to do this. And he said it in the context of his Torah, where the reason they needed to rid them from their home was to eliminate their religious and political and militaristic influence. And that if they didn't do that, it was not going to be safe. It was not going to be a restful, beneficial, enjoyable place to live. They would be plagued by them. And they chose not to listen to Yahweh, and they suffered the consequence. It is the same for us today. We don't listen to God. We accept evil. We negotiate with evil. We pander to evil. And as a result, terrible things happen. My guess is that between Christy and the Bless Yahweh site and JB, you and your Yahweh Barith site, that sometime here shortly, Lisa's very thoughtful letter on pedophilia. I don't know if if any of you have had a chance to read that.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read it, but I do have a copy.
Yeah, and I don't want to go over it on the show, other than to say I would encourage those of you who haven't read it to go to one of those two sites. My guess is it will be posted here shortly on those sites, and to read through her analysis as to why pedophilia not only exists, but it's on the rise. And I read through it, and I happen to agree with most of her conclusions. And then I wrote a response to it, which dovetails into what we're talking about here with the Amalekites. Because people are not willing to listen to Yahweh. They don't recognize that Yahweh hates for a reason. And that hate is an extraordinarily important aspect of life and of love and of compassion. And that we need to know what to hate, and then when we know what to hate, we need to know how to express our disgust, our disdain, our animosity. And if we don't express our animosity towards those who enslave girls to be sex slaves and who treat women as if they were trash and who mislead and who perpetrate great acts of terrorism, then we're incapable of expressing love. We're incapable of being just or moral or rational or reasonable individuals. And so it's really important that we understand why Yahweh gave the instructions on the Amalekites, why he encourages us to be like him and to express righteous indignation, and how that should be expressed. And, I want to be careful here because there are a lot of kooks in the world. Mm-hmm. And this program gets posted in a lot of different places. I'm grateful that it does. I don't want somebody listening to this to think that somehow then they're empowered to go off and kill Muslims. They're not. I don't want them to think that they're empowered to go off and harm or kill anyone, or to have a private vendetta against pedophiles or rapists or terrorists. They do not have such a sanction. Yahweh's instructions on the Amalekites were for the Israelites circa 1400 BCE, while the lessons apply today. The instruction does not, because there are no Amalekites, and you are not ridding Yahweh's home, Yisrael, from them. So you have no divine
out here,
sanction.
the cat's already out of the bag.
Correct.
And the genie's out of the bottle, children.
Right.
And now here's the truth of it
So let me
too.
just finish this thought, Larry, and then I want to hear your thought.
Oh,
do not lash out violently against anyone. It is not appropriate. You have no sanction to do so. We are not encouraging you to do so. In fact, we're encouraging you to do the opposite. You can hate and express your righteous indignation in words. And those words shouldn't be, say, I hate people that are Arabs. That's stupid. You should say, I hate Islam. And the reason I hate Islam is because I've taken the time to read the Quran. I've read the Hadith. I understand Muhammad and Allah and Islam, and it's linked to the Amalekites. I understand that it has a 1,400-year history of pedophilia and of rape and of enslavement and of mass murder. And I understand these things, and because it inspires 99% of terrorist acts today, I hate it, and you should hate it as well. That's how you should express your righteous indignation. Don't pick up a gun. Don't pick up a knife. Don't try to fight fire with fire and respond to the terrorist moron, the Islamic fundamentalist in London, by running your car into Muslims elsewhere in the world. That would be immoral. It would be stupid. It would be counterproductive.
From them.
Right. You have no sanction to do so. Now, Larry, go ahead, please.
Well, no, I'm just in accordance with you. It's quite an understanding. I mean, it's something that we should all pretty easily understand through Scripture, but until it's through Yahweh's words, I should say.
Yeah.
But you're going to hear people claim that the God of covenant writings, what they call an Old Testament, is like the God of the Quran. And the fact is that the relationship between nurturing and harsh and moral and immoral verses in Yahweh's words are more than 500 to 1, is reduced by a factor of 25,000 as compared to the Quran, which is less than 1 in 50. Meaning that the two books couldn't be more different. You wrote that.
Correct.
And I want
to
point out here, and this is the obvious thing, the reason that he said wipe these tribes out is he said, we're not going to have it in my home. And where Yisrael, as in all the tribes, made their mistake is they didn't listen. They all knew better. Well, this will be okay. This will be different for me. This is okay. This will be different for us. This is okay. She's all right. I want to marry her. And on, until finally it became an infection in the land, and it metastasized to the point that Yahweh left them.
Correct.
Yes.
As it relates to the Quran, I want to make this point very clear, too, by the point that you just raised. Yahweh and Debatim, misnamed Deuteronomy, presents the same test really in two different ways, a different perspective, if you will, on how to determine whether or not he inspired a prophet, someone who claimed to speak for him. And he's very clear on this. He says, if you want to know, here's the test to apply. And he also says that if you accept the false prophet who claims to speak for me, like Paul, Muhammad, if you accept them, you're going to die, they're going to die, everyone associated with them is going to die. It is a plague of death. So the stakes are high. If you say, hey, okay, so Paul made some mistakes, and but there's some good that can be taken from it. No, God says if you associate with someone who claims to speak for me and fails any one of these tests, you're going to die, they're going to die. This is life or death. So be really careful here. And when you apply the test that Yahweh delineated, the most important of which are that the testimony historically and prophetically be 100% accurate. There must be historical references that can be proven to be true and no errors. And there must be prophetic testimony which can be shown to be true without any errors. Well, there is no prophecy in the Quran, none. So it fails that test because Yahweh's test not only says it has to be 100% accurate, but it has to be there. No prophecy, he didn't inspire it. 100% of Yahweh's testimony includes prophecy. If there is no prophecy, he did not inspire it. And if there is a single error, he did not inspire it. That's why you can look at the book of Enoch and just puke on it.
Laugh. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but I mean, these would be rational, wouldn't they?
The Quran fails in that regard. There is no accurate prophecy, and all of the historical testimony in the Quran is false. None of it's accurate. And
but when he lays out, when Yahweh lays out his, how do you tell it's real? I remember JB did a whole piece on it. When he lays that out there, what's interesting to me? It's more than obvious as to why he did it, because this is all provable stuff. I mean, there you go. There's your verification.
Right. Now, by the way, by the same token here, there are two other aspects. One of which is part of the test. One of which is just ubiquitous throughout Yahweh's testimony. The other is that what you read has to be consistent with what he has said in those texts which are verifiable. The Torah, the prophets, the Psalms are all verifiable based upon his test. And if you read something that's inconsistent with what he has said, it is not from him, because he is 100% consistent, which means that's why you have to throw out the Christian New Testament. That's why you have to throw out the Book of Enoch. That's why you have to throw out the Quran. They cannot
there was something
from God.
You said that a little better. You actually said that a little better in Yada Yahweh. Actually,
okay.
What you said was that if a passage doesn't correlate with every other passage, in other words, it's in opposition to in any way, shape, or form, then it can't be true. It's as simple as that.
That is correct. And the third aspect
that would be correct.
Yahweh says, Yahweh is my name. It is the only name that I wish to be known by. And a God by any other name is false. So Jesus Christ, the God of the Christian New Testament, is a false God. Allah, the wannabe God of the Quran, who spends all of his time in hell torturing people, is not just a false God, but actually modeled after Satan. So that's the bottom line here. And the consequence of this is life and death. If you don't care, then I don't care for you. But if you care about you ought to know it's life and death.
Of course, one of the big misconceptions, because this is drilled into people's head, is that God's everywhere and he's knocking on your door and he's just begging for you to come in,
right.
Even though you've never taken the time to check any of this out. You've never even questioned anything in your life. And by the way, everybody that's listening to this show has questioned a lot of things in their life. They had to, or they wouldn't have got here. I'm going to tell you that.
That's correct. You wouldn't have gotten here. That is correct.
And
God
people
is not omniscient. He is not omnipresent. Right, and he's not. He's definitely not all loving. Thank goodness.
I just wanted to point that out
because wouldn't be worth knowing.
Every one of these false prophets you're talking about, it doesn't matter if it's a rabbi, it doesn't matter if it's Paul, it doesn't matter if it's a pope, it doesn't matter if it's an imam, it doesn't matter to me if it's Muhammad, because they're all the same bastard to me. But and the reason I say, every one of them took what was instructions delineated to show that we would actually respond to Yahweh and care about the fact that there really was a creator, and he was very rational, and he wanted a real relationship. Every one of them decided that they were going to mislead others into religious precepts. And, I mean, it couldn't be any clearer when you look at the Kippurim examples. As an example, they have a religious convocation, on the 10th day of the 7th month, a religious convocation.
Right.
I don't even know what a religious convocation is.
And that they want
is
you
it
to
monkeys dancing around
you want
in
to
robes?
afflict your soul. I want to afflict your soul.
What
That's the way you're going to reconcile yourself, is to afflict yourself. Listen, the popular belief is the antithesis of truth. The popular notion is that all religions lead to God. All religions lead away from God. That's the truth. All religions, there are no exceptions, lead away from God. No religion
leads to God. That's right. It's verifiable in his own words.
Now,
it's verifiable.
Also, this idea that God wants to be worshipped, and that everyone should worship God in their own way. A God who wants to be worshipped isn't worth knowing, much less worshiping. A being that is capable of creating life, that creates an inferior being, for that inferior being to worship them, is so perverted, so inept, so disgusting.
Got ego problems.
They are not worth knowing. If I were to read that Yahweh wants to be worshipped by man, I would reject him. I would reject him. His entire approach is father-son, father-daughter, father of the covenant. And no son or daughter ever worships their father, ever. It is a perverted concept. Yahweh is not insecure. He is looking for intelligent, rational, fun, open-minded companionship. He wants to spend his eternity with people who are enjoyable to be around, who want to be part of his family, and who want to spend their eternity getting to know him as he is, who are interested in being right, in learning, in growing, in knowing, and understanding. That is what he's interested in. And there's no point ever that he asks us to bow down to him, that he asks us to pray to him, or that he asks us to worship him. No, never, anywhere does he request any of those things. Nor does
he also,
that
can I throw this in?
Yeah.
He also does not ask us to run around proselytizing people. He asked us to share his words, and he does everything is free will, and people can't be dragged out of Babylon with wild horses and chains. Trust me when I tell you, I've tried it with my own wife.
Yeah. We do
done.
have a responsibility to get to know him. He tells us constantly, I want you to observe, which means to closely examine and carefully consider his Torah instructions. So he wants us to ask us specifically to be observant, which means to closely examine and carefully consider. He wants us to listen to him. And he wants us to to make connections, to think so that we come to understand who he is and what he's offering. And he wants us to respond to him based upon the terms and conditions of being part of his family, his covenant. Once you have done those things and you become part of his family, you accept some responsibilities. You know, there is a responsibility in every family. There are house rules, if you will. You don't have to be obedient. This is not about obedience. It's not about subjecting your will to another. But there are responsibilities that are being part of the family. And the responsibility that comes along with being part of Yahweh's family is that you do not mislead others regarding the nature of God. That when you hear something and something is brought up in your presence that you know is wrong, that you're prepared to confront it and that you do confront it. And that if you encounter anyone that has any interest whatsoever in knowing Yahweh, that you're prepared to respond and point them in the right direction.
Which is entirely different, though. And I just want to point this out because so many people have trouble with this. I know too many people in the covenant where I've heard it. It is not incumbent upon us to drag people we know out of Babylon. We can share the words with them, and when they reject them, and believe me, you may try 5 times, you might try 50 times with somebody you really care about, but at some point you have to really accept the fact that people walk to Yahweh of their own free will. You can't drag them to it. You can't do it. No need to try.
Cannot.
I will tell you that.
You can't. First of all, you can't get anyone to leave religion. Until somebody leaves religion, there's nothing you can say to them. There's no aspect of God's testimony that they're going to consider. They will reject everything. They will reject everything God has to say until such time as they start to question and walk away from their religion. And so if you can't get them, if Yahweh through and also Yosha, still diminished manifestation of Yahweh, so still Yahweh, did in fact confront religious and political people and institutions
And but he wasn't trying to talk them into anything.
No,
he was just telling them what kind of trash they were.
Right. At no point did he try to win over or save a political or religious person. Never. People don't understand that. He did not love them. He did not accept them. He did not reach out to them. He did not invite them. He exposed them and he condemned them. And he wasn't kind when he did so. He was ruthless. He was mean. He was aggressive. He was intolerant. He showed his hatred for them. He used his words to expose and condemn them. Religious leaders, political leaders, military leaders. But at no time do you find that Yahweh is trying to save them. He simply exposes them and condemns them. Now, those who have walked away from religion, you find Yahweh not trying to save them, but trying to reason with them, trying to communicate with them in a way that points them in the right direction, that tells them where to look for answers, the Torah, the prophets, and to turn to what Yahweh has said so that we come to know who he is and what he's offering. But he only does that with people who have already left religion. So this notion of you ought to be a televangelist and preach salvation is
televangelists ain't worried about converting people. They're just worried about making money.
That is correct.
Well, that's the obvious. It's hard to imagine. I mean, even before I knew Yahweh, it was hard for me to imagine anybody believed any of them. People could have even been sincere. I mean, that's just insane on its face. I mean, really.
Correct.
You're not trying too hard if you're buying into that. You're not a very rational person to begin with. So.
And it's important to recognize, you know what the largest religion, not only in the world today, but over the course of the last 1,500 years?
I would say secular humanism. I would say it's secular humanism.
Well, today there are more secular humanists, probably as much, very close, if not as many secular humanists or anything else. They would not consider themselves a religion. Although
they are a religion.
I would call themselves a religion because they manifest all of the religious characteristics that
I think the Supreme Court called them a religion. Not that I care what the Supreme Court has to say. But they literally
a group of people
called it
that actually refers to themselves as a religion. You know what the largest religion in the world is?
Catholicism.
I would say Christianity. I don't know.
Well, Christianity is, but there's one form of Christianity that's larger than the rest of the religion combined.
Catholicism?
Yes, Roman Catholicism. Yeah, Roman Catholicism. There are more Roman Catholics than there are. Roman Catholicism comprises about 60% of Christianity. Okay, so 60%
and the rest
of those
who would refer
to themselves as Christians, with Protestants and Orthodox Christians making up the rest of Christianity. Now, when Yahweh was describing beasts, human institutions, whether they be empires or grew out of empires, he described the mother of all beasts, which sometimes
he was talking about
as beasts.
He was talking about Rome.
Beasts which are vicious, or you refer to them as harlots and whores. When he described the place, the culture, from which all of the beasts that were deadly to humanity were derived, he said they came from Babylon. In Hebrew, it's Babel. The most published book in the world today is based on this root. BBL.
Yeah, Bible.
Bible, correct. Yeah. It's the name of the place, of the institution, of the empire from which evil regarding misinformation, that which is deadly, a plague upon humanity has come. And, of course, the most famous religious text in the world is named after it, BBL, Bible, and Babel. The term means to intermix. And by intermixing, to confuse. By intermixing, to pervert and to corrupt. And, of course, Christianity and Islam are religions based on intermixing pagan lore and applying new names. Now, from Babel, Yahweh tells us that the next most vicious and deadly influence on humankind were the Median Persians. And he says the next was Greece, particularly the Greece of Alexander and the four kings that ruled over Alexander's conquered empire. And then he said there was a beast that was vastly more vicious and deadly than even the mother of harlots, Babylon, than even the Persians, than even the Greeks. And he expressly says that, and at the time that he was saying this country, this empire didn't even exist. This is in Daniel, written about 450 to 500 BCE, a couple of centuries before Rome even began to exist, and 5 centuries before Rome reached the pinnacle of imperial Rome. He said it would be the most vicious of all beasts, the Roman Empire. And indeed, it was. In fact, for those of you who aren't aware of just how vicious Rome was, I would encourage you to read Volume 7 of Yada Yahweh. Very long chapters presented the history. And I went through this history because of what I read in Daniel. God despises the Roman Empire. And for good reason also, because beyond being vicious to all of those they influenced, and the Romans were ultimate scum in every aspect of the word, from their leaders to their legions. But of course, they destroyed the temple in 70 CE, Yahweh's home. And they hauled the Jews off into slavery to Rome, and they confiscated all the treasure in the temple to fund the building of the most decadent building in all of human history. If you were to say, what building is the greatest shrine to man's viciousness, to man's deceit, to the worst of humankind, if you study the history of what took place in the Roman Colosseum, that would be it'd be the place.
Roman Colosseum, of course.
Yeah, and the Roman Colosseum was built by the slaves that were taken by Vespasian's legions and his son up to Rome. There was the Jews were the slaves, and the values, the treasure of Yahweh's home, the temple, was used to fund.
Can you imagine taking Yahweh's home and turning it into a coliseum using that building material?
Right.
You are insane.
Yeah,
you're insane.
Yeah, I know, insane. And then, of course, that wasn't the worst attack. The worst attack came in the Yobel year of 133, when Rome devastated Israel, renamed the place, salted the land, and Hadrian attempted to turn Israel into rename Jerusalem after himself and turn it into a holiday retreat for his vicious legions.
Yeah, didn't you say he crucified 500,000 Jews, roughly?
Yeah, that's very close to that number, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so there is no nation, no kingdom, no empire that God hates more than Imperial Rome, with one exception. Yeah, it was really clear. He says that while Rome was vicious, he said that there would be something that would grow out of Rome. He even talks about being a lowly and little horn, which is described Paulos. That's what Paulos means in Latin, lowly and little. That there'd be a lowly and little outgrowth that would emerge from imperial Rome, grow to infect the entire world. And there's only one beast in human history that has infected the entire world. There's only one beast that has grown out of the Roman Empire. And do not think that the Roman Catholic Church is called the Roman Catholic Church just because the Vatican is in Rome. Because the Roman Catholic Church was not conceived in Rome.
No, it was conceived in Constantinople.
Speaks of the Roman Empire. It was conceived in Constantinople. It was conceived and imposed not by Constantine, and that whole myth of him seeing the sign of the cross in front of the sun and hearing in this voice conquer never occurred. It was a myth written later to unite Constantine and Theodosius to create this universalism, and that's what Catholic means, universal religion. But Theodosius is the founder of Roman Catholicism. He's the one that imposed it as the only acceptable religion for the Roman Empire, and he did so out of Constantinople when Rome was an afterthought. Rome itself was on its deathbed and would soon be destroyed. It's Roman in the sense of it grew out of the Roman Empire, and that Roman emperors were the first popes. And that Yahweh says that which grows out of imperial Rome is the most vicious, the most deadly beast, and it's the one that will trample upon the whole world. And it's the one that exists all the way to the end of time. It is the ultimate manifestation of Babylon. And yet, there are more Roman Catholics than there are participants in any other religion in the world, and they carry around a book that includes the book of Daniel that expressly presents them as the plague of death, as the most deadly regime and institution ever created. And then in Revelation, when Yahweh is expressly identifying this transition from imperial Rome to Roman Catholicism, he leaves absolutely no doubt that it's the Roman Catholic Church, and they carry around the book of Revelation as well.
Oh, well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's 100%. But what's really odd is that, as you point out, all Christianity is just watered-down Catholicism. They just don't believe it is. You know as well as I do. Many, many, many Christian organizations point their finger at Rome and say, well, there's the beast.
Yeah. But they are Roman Catholic. Roman Catholicism and Christianity are one and the same.
They're inseparable.
They're just one and the same, folks. It's Roman Catholicism imposed Sunday. Christians of all denominations worship their God on Sunday.
With the exception of you got your Seventh-day Adventists and them, but they still run around with Paulos.
But even with the Seventh-day Adventists, the Seventh-day Adventists shouldn't even exist. They have predicted the end of the world twice and failed both times. Their wannabe prophet was obviously demon possessed. They could not be further. And because of the fact that they have so proven themselves to be false, there are very few of them left today. It is all but vanished as a sect of Christianity. But Christianity, they use the same term as Roman Catholicism, which has no basis in Yahweh's testimony, Christ and Christianity. They use the same name of Jesus, which bears no legitimacy in Christianity. They celebrate the same two holy days, Christmas, which has no basis in Yahweh's testimony, none whatsoever. It's purely pagan. And also Easter, which is even more pagan, even named after the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God that Yahweh denounces as Istar, Astarte. And you couldn't be more Roman Catholic if you tried. The only difference.
Well, they use Baal's moniker too, Lord.
Is the Pope in their hierarchy. Other than that, and perhaps for some, this devotion to Mary, who is the Queen of Heaven and Mother of God in Roman Catholicism. So they take the hierarchy away and the worship of Mary away, and all the rest of it is the same. And it's all wrong. And so if you take something that is wrong in 1,000 ways and is right in no ways, and you remove 2 of the ways that it is wrong, you don't get to right.
Well, I mean, any religion based on faith and belief is wrong.
Well,
it's not tzedakah. It's not righteous.
It's
not correct,
wrong.
And it's not right.
Right. You ought not trust. In fact, you cannot trust anything that is based on faith or belief. You can only trust that which can be known.
Greg, do you remember back when you were just starting out in business, when you were making 5 cents a call or a quarter a call?
Yeah, I was making 25 cents an hour.
Now, this is a real serious question.
I was probably overpaid at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Because you weren't listening, that thing? Okay.
And actually, by the way, the reason I only made 25 cents an hour, and I was working 90 hours a week, is because I wasn't listening.
Yeah. Now I want to ask you this question. Exactly. And I want to ask you this question. Now you were a Christian at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, I sure was.
Okay. How did it feel to be living on a hope and a prayer? That's the question.
You know, it was during this period that I began to recognize that my evangelical Christianity was a fraud. And I recognized it for a lot of reasons. One is I was asked to teach evangelism, and I realized that what I was saying didn't make any sense. And I was an ordained ruling elder, and therefore asked to constantly provide large public prayers. And I realized that anyone who gives a public prayer isn't speaking to God; they're speaking to the audience and trying to impress the audience with what they say. And I came to realize that there was just too many conflicts between what God, a name that I didn't even know was Yahowah, had said and what Christians believe, and there are too many consistencies with pagan religious lore in Christianity, and I was very quickly losing my faith in Christianity at the time that I began to work. And I knew that God did not answer
the best way to learn
prayer.
Something is to try and teach it. And so you tried to teach it and realized it was full of shit.
That is correct. I taught Bible studies, and I would always turn to Paul for Bible studies, and I would always try to explain him in context as what he was trying to convey, because otherwise you couldn't understand him. And the more I did it, the more dirty, the more inappropriate I felt. And so, I was transitioning away. It is interesting. I remember.
But how did you feel living on a wing and a prayer? That's the question. I'll tell you how I felt back then.
I hated it.
When I had a couple rough
lonely.
patches.
I felt abandoned.
I felt awful. If you ever get down to where it's all about faith, kiss your ass goodbye, folks.
But there was this giant hole in me. I felt very lonely, extraordinarily vulnerable, as a complete failure. Kirk today was talking about this statement that is wrongly translated. With Yosha is responding to someone that says, good teacher or something. And he said, "Why do you call me good? There's only one who is good." And then he says, "None of you are good." And you realize that what he said was tob. It means none of you are beneficial. None of you are functioning as you were designed. None of you are pleasing. None of you are working the way you were designed to work. And when I think about it, that was my problem. I was not functional. I was a dysfunctional individual. And
as are most people, but you recognized it. That's what's happening
why I was
here.
dysfunctional? I was dysfunctional for the same reason that
probably a million reasons.
999,000 out of 900 and every 1 million people is dysfunctional. I wasn't listening to Yahweh.
You didn't even know what your reason to be here was, for one thing. And then,
yeah. I failed in
without
business,
that purpose.
Right. I failed miserably in business because I did not listen to my buyers. I wanted to talk to them and sell them what I had to offer, as opposed to meeting their needs, listening to what they wanted. And the same thing then applied to Yahweh. When I started to listen to what he was offering and what he wanted in return, then I became functional.
I want to point this out because there are some new people listening, okay? Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with one of them yesterday online, just, typing. And what I would want people to know, and we've been through this before, when you're reading the material like Yada Yah and ITG and Observations now, and you can go read Questioning Paul if you still have any inkling of a belief that or a concept that Paul could be correct.
Or even if you now know Yahweh, and you were like JB, you were an agnostic, so you never had to jettison yourself of the poison of Pauline Christianity, but you have loved ones, members of your family, who are still caught in that Pauline lie.
Yeah, for the purposes of knowledge and so forth.
Just being able to answer them and to expose
it's a good
Paul,
tool.
It's worth the read. It's worth the read.
Yeah, it's a good tool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, there's prophecy about Paul, in the text. Chaba
I know. To
me, it's one of the most amazing prophecies ever written, actually. But I guess most people don't see it that way, but I do.
But also Proverbs 6, 7, and 8 are the same thing.
That too.
Right in your face.
Yeah.
This is Paul, and this is how he works and why he's bad. Yes.
Well, but here's the point. I had Terry Hastings do me a translation. I had Kirk, who did this really incredible translation. I've read many of your translations, of course. And what happens when people walk in, they go, well, I don't really know. I don't read Hebrew, but I have an interlinear, and what they want to do, and I'm not attacking them for that. I'm glad they're going at least that far. But what I want you to do, if you would, both of you, or all three of you, just explain to me why you don't just go to an interlinear. Most of your interlinears, when it says mitzvah, it's going to say command, right? I mean, that's really what it's going to say. And that's not what it means.
Okay, an interlinear has only one function, and it's not to provide a translation. So if you're using the interlinear for the purpose of translation, all of the interlinears were published by Bible translators, by the same companies that have their translations. So if you read an interlinear, the translation that is going with the interlinear is not a translation from the words, but instead based upon the New American Standard or the NIV or the King James or the New King James. They're presenting the same English text. They're just showing you the Hebrew words from which it was allegedly derived. So it is not a translating tool. The value of an interlinear is that when you take the time to do two things with it. One is to check it against the Dead Sea Scrolls, which you can do by purchasing the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, which again is not a translating tool. All the Dead Sea Scroll Bible is going to do is it presents in italics what is different in the Masoretic text, because your interlinear is going to be based on the Masoretic text. So it's important to know what is different in the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Masoretic is based on a Babylonian line of text, and it first appears around 1100 CE, and the Dead Sea Scrolls dates to 200 BCE, and they're based upon a line of text, a family of text that was maintained in Yisrael. So night and day superior, and so it's really important that you make that correction. The second thing you have to do is you have to look at the words that are transliterated in Hebrew or written in Babylonian Hebrew, and convert that to the original alphabet, which is Paleo-Hebrew, and to remove the diacritical markings that the Masoretes put in the 11th century CE, because the diacritical markings can be used to change the word. You have to look at all of the words that are written using the combination of letters that you will see in your interlinear. So what the interlinear does for you is until you really learn Hebrew grammar, it provides you with an access to what the word is, at least in the Masoretic, so that you can then look up the word, and we'll talk about that in a moment, as to how you then look up the word based upon the interlinear. And it will provide you with information, which just quickly is, what was the preposition that, because in Hebrew, prepositions and conjunctions as well as pronouns are all integrated into the verb and into the words themselves. So it will tell you what prepositions, like ba, in, or a article, ha, the, or a pronoun, my, your, their, his, her. It will tell you whether the word is feminine or masculine, which is important in Hebrew, whether the pronouns are feminine, masculine, singular, or plural, and it will tell you what conjunctions and what articles are associated with the word. And so you need to know those things in translating, and then once you know the structure around them, the grammatical structure around the word, then you look up the word. Don't rely on the interlinear for the translation, because it's not providing you a valid translation. Look up the word in not one, but at least 5 or 6 Hebrew dictionaries. Mm-hmm. Because if you look up one, you're going to be misled most of the time. You've got to use at least 5. Kirk, you do this a lot. What's your experience?
Oh yeah, and I probably go through 10 different ones, but also I always keep in mind once you have a certain perspective through the Torah, then you've got a pretty good idea of when they're trying to con you or when they're selling their program, as opposed to Shamar, obey. That's
right. Yeah,
you finally tune your BS detector.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You do. Yeah, like if you see Shama and it's written as obey, you know the Shama means to listen. You don't even need to look it up. You know the Shama. If it says if you see Shamar and it's rendered keep, that's wrong. It doesn't mean keep. It means to observe, to closely examine and carefully consider. And so, if it says Be'eth, for example, and it's translated as temple, no. Be'eth means family home. Mm-hmm. And if it says Be'reth, and even if it's rendered covenant, you're capable of, because you've studied the word, you know that means family relationship. And so if you see mikra, you're not going to accept convocation, because you know that mikra is based on the verb kara, which means to invite, to welcome, to greet, to meet, to read and recite.
Yeah,
and so you're going to you will build over time an understanding, and that's why you can't just look up the words. But when you look up mikra, for example, you need to say, well, what is the verbal root of mikra? Because if you don't look up the verbal root, you've got no chance whatsoever of understanding the word. And almost all languages, old languages, nouns are based on their actionable roots. The actionable root, the verb, defines the noun. And so, like, for example, people misunderstand Kodesh, and they think that Kodesh means new moon or moon. No, it doesn't mean new moon or moon. And they think that, well, it means month. No, it doesn't mean month. It can convey the concept of month because it means to renew. Based on Kadash, the verbal root, which absolutely happens to be spelled in Hebrew the same way. And so you need to look up like kara, which is the verbal root of bikra, and you need to look up the verbal root and understand what it conveys, and then you're in a position to understand the noun or the verb in the case when it's written as a verb. But if it's being written as a verb, you can't just stop there. You have to take the time, and interlinears, the really good ones, will present this for you to know what stem was applied to the verb. Was it the no nuance, just the literal interpretation of the kara, a literal interpretation, a genuine relationship between subject and object? Is it a verbal root that says that the subject, like the subject is causing the object to participate in the action as if the object was experiencing it in the same way as the subject, the hiffle? So there you have to understand.
So we've got stems, we've got volitions,
right.
we've got moods.
Right, we have moods.
We've got verbs, we've got nouns, and then we have perspective,
and you have to understand, and
we
verbs,
have context.
The
right?
Verbs,
I mean, we have all these
things. The verbs
things.
are never stuck in time. There is no past, present, or future tense in Hebrew. So if you're going to understand Hebrew, you need to think in the sense that the verbs are was, is, and will be all together at the same time.
Yeah, like Haya.
Right.
Let me point something out here real quick. Oddly enough, I've had plenty of debates with Jewish people I've known where I've shown them Yahshua, and he's talking about Yahusha, and he's talking about fulfillment of the Moed Mikra, and they go, ha ha, when that was written, it hadn't even happened yet. And I sit there and shake my head, and I say, what in the hell is wrong with you people?
Yeah,
are you saying I understand Hebrew better than you do? Go ahead.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, while the Moed Mikra existed long before Yahshua. Yahshua, of course,
the Moed Mikra
did. It began 765 BCE, and the Moed 745-ish, 765 BCE. The Moed Mikra were actually celebrated by Noah.
BCE.
By Noah.
Sure.
That's why there was the clean animals, and why all the references to 7 throughout the story. They were celebrated by Noah, and they were absolutely celebrated by Abraham, and then by Abraham and Yishak. And then, of course, they're delineated and lived in the life of Yisrael circa 1450 BCE through the Exodus and the journey into the Promised Land. And so the Moed Mikra, which began with Pesach, Passover, and Matzah and Bekurim, and then Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, have existed for the entire duration of time. They've existed for the entire duration of time, and they were celebrated on this planet with humans, beginning with Noah, and then Abraham and Yishak, and then with the children of Israel.
Probably even earlier.
Exodus.
After Adam and Chawah were removed from the garden, they were clothed in they were covered in clothes.
Well, that's probably true.
What do you want to bet those clothes were made of lamb?
Right. And why was
so.
it that Abel's offering of the lamb was acceptable to Yahweh?
Exactly.
Yeah,
they were keeping it way back then.
That's correct. So while the part of it that is true that they said is that Yosha's fulfillment of it had not occurred yet. No, it wouldn't occur for 777 years. That is correct.
Yeah, and so, but what you just said here, talking about translations is correct, because it means there is no time, whether it's future, past, or present.
Right. I used to be misled with what was conveyed as the prophetic past tense, that most of Yahweh's prophecies were written in the past tense, and they came to that conclusion because it was the wa imperfect, and the wa imperfect was to convey the concept of past tense, and that Yahweh, that Hashem, in the case of the religious scholars, conveyed his prophecies in past tense to say they are as good as having already happened. And so I kind of parroted that. It sounded kind of neat. And then I realized, wait a minute. The imperfect speaks, the wa is simply a conjunction. It ties things together. It says these things are connected. And the imperfect speaks of ongoing action, action without end. So it can't be past tense because it can't be written with a conjunction that is something that does not have end, that is ongoing, with future ramifications. And then I came to realize that, no, the fact is that there is no Hebrew past, present, or future. What Yahweh says was true, is true, will always be true, and that only works if you are consistent. You have to be always consistent, yes, for that to be the case. So Yahweh, when he introduced himself, he used the verb, haya twice. And haya means I was, I am, I will be, I exist.
Mm-hmm. So let me toss in a couple more.
You have to be really careful if you're going to do a translation that you don't just start and stop with an interlinear.
I barely use an interlinear.
Yeah, well, I wanted that to. I wanted you guys to explain that, because it's so important when people walk in and they go, well, I want to challenge what this says, and then, it's for the same reason you can't read commentary. You go out and buy a Dead Sea Bible, and I'm sorry they ever named it that, but that's what they call it. But if you go out and buy a Dead Sea Bible and you see an English commentary running by it, understand the English commentary has nothing to do with what's written.
Right.
It's like they're copying a Bible to the side of it.
And aside from the historical notes that may be added, those can be useful, but otherwise the commentary is useless.
Yeah, I like a lot of the notes in the Dead Sea Scrolls Bible, for example, are useful because they will describe the differences between the various texts. Because it's not like the Dead Sea Scrolls is a monolithic text, and like the Great Isaiah Scroll, while it has the entire text of Yahshua Isaiah, it's not perfectly accurate. There is no human undertaking that's perfectly accurate. The scribe of the Great Isaiah Yahshua Scroll made mistakes. There are places where other scrolls conflict with it that are similarly dated, and the other scrolls are more accurate than it is in certain places. So, it's a tool, and all of the information that can be gathered and historically known about it is useful. You just have to apply the proper filter, and the most important filters in translating and coming to know Yahweh are the perspective the Torah provides, the knowledge that Yahweh is absolutely consistent, and if you come to know who He is, what He's offering, and that He's always consistent, and you apply that perspective to the text, then you can use these tools so long as you are diligent and you use all of them and you're systematic about it. You can use these tools to translate anything he has to say. You don't have to be able to speak Hebrew. You don't even have to be able to read Hebrew. Collectively, these tools will provide the insights that you need, and that's the reason why I really wrote an introduction to God. It was to say, all right, here is the material we have available to us. Here are the resources, the tools we have available to us, and here's how to use those tools. And here are the oldest texts we have available to us and how to use them. And then let's go through things that Yahweh has said that are really important, and let's use this toolbox. Here's the alphabet. Here's what the letters mean. Here's how the letters were drawn. Here's the grammar and how the grammar is applied. And now that we have this understanding, let's go off and use it through by collectively evaluating the text that is the most important for us to understand. Now, there is one form of commentary, Larry, that I do think has value. And that one form of commentary is if it's based entirely on what Yahweh said, doing your utmost to examine it from the oldest available source, to translate it as accurately and completely as if your commentary is on this is in context what this word could mean, this is how this word is used elsewhere, This is how what he is saying relates to other things that he has said. This is the implication of what he is saying in this particular text. So if your commentary is trying to wrestle with and understand each statement that Yah makes, and to underscore the most important aspects of it, and to introduce it from the proper perspective, I think that kind of commentary has value.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but you're talking about commentary based on Yahweh's words. What I'm saying is there's so much of the commentary you've seen. Look, I've read them, and they say, well, the Dead Sea Scroll Bibles proves the Bible's accurate, and the guy writes to the side of it, and every time Yahweh's name's coming in there, he's writing Lord. And you look at the text he wrote, and it's identical to a King James Version Bible. And then you look at the text, and it doesn't even say what he says it's saying. And they go, yeah, that proves we're right. And then that's the end of it.
That's propaganda.
And the fact of the matter is,
so
the Dead Sea Scrolls are do the opposite to the Torah, prophets, and Psalms that the oldest 69 manuscripts do to the Christian New Testament. The oldest 69 manuscripts of the codexes of the Christian New Testament prove that there's nothing in it that can be trusted, that it is so hugely unreliable, so inconsistent, so garbled, so in conflict with the oldest witnesses that you cannot trust it. That's what it. That there are more.
Oh yeah, it just proves that
there are
garbage.
Right. Yeah, there are more discrepancies than there are words. That's what it demonstrates. It destroys the credibility. The oldest 69 extant manuscripts of the Christian New Testament absolutely destroy the credibility of the Christian New Testament. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are some 85 to 87% consistent with the Masoretic text. And they're even more consistent with the Masoretic text when you pull out the diacritical markings from the Masoretic and you just look at the letters which comprise the words. And when you remove references like to my Lord as opposed to Yahweh from the Masoretic text, although in the Masoretic text they actually have Yahweh, it's just corrupted to my Lord in translations. But if you look at it from that perspective, when you're dealing with 85 to 87% accurate, and recognize that some 75% of the differences are prepositions and pronouns and different variant spellings and really fairly minor changes. Now, it's not true everywhere. I mean, in Yashayah, there's a lot of changes that the Masoretes made that are deadly. But for the most part,
look at Psalm, the 22nd or 22nd Psalm. Mizmor. I mean, that's blatant.
53. 53.
Or if you go to Daniel, where it says that the miracle that Yahweh is going to display is a young maiden giving birth. I think you point out, well, that's some miracle. Young maiden giving birth.
Some miracle.
But it says virgin. It does say virgin.
A young woman of childbearing age gave birth.
Isn't that incredible?
That's a heck of a miracle. So there are a lot of places where the Dead Sea Scrolls do correct in important ways the Masoretic text. But for the most part, the Dead Sea Scrolls indicate that the Masoretic is 85%
fairly accurate.
consistent.
Yeah, I get
right.
It.
And 85% when you realize that 75% of the differences are fairly minor. That's a really
and then
big
the
deal.
others are intentional because they're trying to hide the the idea of Yahusha. I get that. Yeah, sure.
So then that means that your real task then is simply to look at the words, understand the stems, the conjugations, and the moods, and then render it as accurately and as completely as possible, and then to consider what's being said so that you come to understand it, making the necessary connections, and that's the thrill of a lifetime. That is, there's nothing more valuable, more useful, more beneficial. That is what we were designed to do. We're functioning at our highest level when we do that, and it's worth doing. But you can't do it. The term that we would use in business is half-ass. You can't do it and say, well, I'm going to simply use an interlinear, and this is what the interlinear says, so that must be true. No, that's a waste. You're wasting your time.
Do you remember a few shows back we went through the idea? What was it that I forget what word it was. It became laughable, but the whole it had to do with worship. Yahowah I think it was Yahowah. They were saying means worship when we know Yahowah means to make a declaration. As a verb, anyway.
And as a verb, it means the word that is translated worship, and throughout the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, is actually a word that whose primary meaning is to make a declarative response, to make your position and your response to something known. Yeah,
sure. It's a declaration,
and it's actually based on the verb that means to live, to flourish. So it's to make a declarative statement regarding life.
The means to live, to flourish.
That is correct.
To be abundant.
Yes, and there is absolutely no etymology of the word that would indicate that it should be rendered bow down or worship.
But remember in that show, you read all the reasons why they say it means worship, and every one of them said, well, because the other Bible said it.
That's right. That's exactly
what the only reason.
Right.
So they went down through like 6 Bibles, and that was their reason for believing that's what it meant. No, it's like nobody went and checked.
I think I stopped using that excuse in like middle school. But he said it was that.
When you tell people that Yahweh does not have a word for obey, and people will read their Old Testament and it says obey, 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 and you say that doesn't mean that Yahweh has a word for obey. All that means is that one translation simply copied another. One translation copied another, and none of them were translations, but instead copy edits. Because if you look at the Hebrew word that has been rendered obey, it is always shama. And there is no aspect of shama, not even an extension of shama, that conveys the idea of obeying. All shama means is to listen. Period. To listen. Now, in English we have 2 words for listening: hear and listen. So, shama means to hear and to listen. I don't think there's no way to distinguish between the two. But that's all it means. There is no causality that would render listening and hearing obeying. You listen so that you can know. That's why you listen. You listen to learn. Mm-hmm. And Torah, they present Torah as law. And yet there is no derivative, no root, no related word to Torah that infers law in any way, shape, or form. There's no place where Yahweh defines his Torah as law. There's no place where Torah can be understood as law. Torah means to teach, to guide.
Well, sure there is. A church or a synagogue. There's places where Torah means law.
Yes, but not according to Yahweh.
Not in Hebrew.
That's another issue. Okay.
Right.
Craig, just one more thing about the translation part, and we talked about that a tiny bit today and have many times before. But the difference between thought or the concept of in Hebrew versus philosophical bent of Greek.
This is one of the things that you have to be really careful of, and one of the things I've come to enjoy maybe more than anything else is because I do enjoy Yosha's words, and Yosha's testimony to me is enlightening. It's brilliant. It's insightful. He does a marvelous job of introducing us to the concept of understanding Yahweh's testimony. But if you're going to get there, for example, upon this rock I will build my church. That's the English rendering, and it's a corruption of the Greek. Now, of course, in the Greek it's ecclesia, but you first have to recognize Yahosha did not speak English, did he? English language wouldn't exist.
Greek either.
Wouldn't exist for 1,600 years. So he didn't speak English. And the conversation is now brought to us in Greek, but he didn't speak Greek ever. Never once did he say a single word in Greek. Never once. None of the disciples spoke Greek. None of them. Yosha spoke one language, Hebrew. Now, there is one phrase that he is alleged to have spoken in Aramaic, and yet if you study Aramaic, and it's easy to do because about a quarter of Daniel is written in Aramaic and 3/4 of it written in Hebrew. If you take the time to study Daniel, the portions of Daniel in Aramaic, after you've studied Hebrew, the thing you come to realize is that Aramaic and Hebrew are extraordinarily similar. If you heard somebody speaking
it's more
Aramaic,
of a dialect of Hebrew than a separate language.
Correct. That is correct.
It's like Boston English versus Texas English.
That is correct. That is correct. And so it is.
Well, then they couldn't understand each other.
Right. It's conveying the same thought, using the same sounds, but in a different alphabet. Okay. So if he was the one phrase that he is alleged to have made in Aramaic, my God, why have you forsaken me? He absolutely did not say in Aramaic because he was quoting the 22nd Psalm. And by quoting the 22nd Psalm, he is reading it in the language it was written, Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew. And so if you're going to understand what he said, for example, in the statement that is rendered in English, I can't say translate because it's not a translation of the Greek, upon this rock I will build my church. You need to look at each of the Greek words and to recognize what Hebrew word is that a translation of.
Well, ecclesia supposedly means called out, assembly, right. So that would be Korah or Mikre.
Well, there's only one Hebrew word that can be translated called out or called out assembly. And ecclesia, ecclesia means to call out. Ecclesia means to call, and ek means out. So in Greek, ecclesia means to call out. The Greek verb kara means to call out. And to turn the verb into a noun, because I'm going to build my, now the Greek word that was translated was ecclesia, it's a noun. There's only one Hebrew noun based on kara, to call out, to invite, to welcome, to meet, to greet,
Mikre.
to read and recite. Mikre. Right. Yeah, Mikre, and in the plural, Mikre. Right? Only one.
Right.
So if you are the least bit thoughtful, the least bit enlightened, the least bit rational, you're going to recognize, he said, that upon this rock, I'm going to build my Mikra, which is Pesach, Matzah.
Or I'm going to establish is probably what he said.
Which is exactly what he did over the next weeks. Exactly what he would do.
Since if you're a Christian church and you're having a religious organization, you can't tie what Yahosha was doing to what he said he was going to do.
There is no church under this situation. What there is the 7 Mikre. Now, the other thing is build in Hebrew is bana. Bana is such a spectacular word in Hebrew. It's the root of it is ben. And it's ben with a hey at the end of it, which would make it the feminine. Now, in Hebrew, Bana is not actually daughter, where Ben is son, you would think that Bana would be daughter. But Ben is the root of it, but it makes the concept of child feminine by the ending. And what it speaks of, it's not to render Bana as simply build is inadequate. What it means is to build a family home, to establish and reestablish and reaffirm based upon the concept of the family name. Now, so when you realize he said Bana and all the implications of Bana to the family name, the family home, and reestablishing the family, based upon the Mikre, the 7 invitations, which he then fulfilled in Jerusalem, which is where he was headed, which is why he told Peter, Shimon Kepesh, hey man, don't tell me we shouldn't be going to Jerusalem. We're going to Jerusalem because of all of this. And so if you start to think in Hebrew and you then render your understanding based upon what he said in Hebrew, you go from being misled to being inspired, to being enlightened. So it's like that concept you were brought up today, Kirk. You brought up of, why you say I'm good. There's only one who is good, but he didn't say you, which is the Greek word for good.
No.
He said Tob. And you looked up Tob because what you found is, what he's saying is that you guys aren't functioning as you were designed. You're not functioning in a pleasing or beneficial way. You're dysfunctional. Right?
Right. And so evil is dysfunctional, and of course Tob is, and its short meaning, of course, is functional.
Right. Tob is functional, and low Tob would mean dysfunctional, and Ra means perverted.
Totally
you have
off
perverted
the wrong
your
path.
purpose. Right. You have perverted your purpose. What is, when we function right, we're listening to Yahweh, we're observing what he had to say, we're incorporating it into our lives, and we're functioning as he intended as his sons and daughters.
That was our purpose.
Otherwise, we're dysfunctional.
Right.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the condition the world's in today, and that's the way it is.
People are dysfunctional because of the fact that they're blowing off. I think that the term you use, they're just blowing off the words of Yahweh. And if you don't consider Yahweh's testimony, you are dysfunctional.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
our whole view of everything, so if you're listening and you're new to this, because for the most part we are using this program to speak to the covenant family.
Sure.
This program is designed such that those who are part of the covenant family, who have come to know Yahweh as he reveals himself in his Torah, and who have come to understand the terms and conditions of his covenant, of which there are 5, and who have accepted those terms and conditions, and are now involved in growing and flourishing as part of his family. We come together on the Shabbat as Yahweh requested to read and recite his testimony and to come to know him and to express our enthusiasm for the relationship with him, which is a dynamic thing, because when you look at how Yahweh communicated with us, he did not simply say, here's who I am, and here's what I'm offering, and this is why it's of your benefit, and this is what I'm expecting in return. He spent even more time expressing his disdain, his animosity for human corruptions and human institutions. And so we speak of them as well.
Yes.
But that's what this program is designed to do. And if you're been presented it and you want to swipe it away because it's inconsistent with your religion, don't play the game of trying to identify this with a cult, because we have no leader other than Yahweh. We have no text that we believe in. We trust Yahweh's testimony. All we try to do is to accurately and completely communicate what he had to say, and to understand it, share it, and respond to it. We don't ask for any money. We don't have a clubhouse. We don't have a leader. We don't have an institution. And we're not trying to convert anyone. Don't care what you choose to believe. Just do not care.
Yeah. You do what you want to do. Unless I personally know you, in which case I do kind of hope you eventually come to know Yahowah.
Yeah.
By and large,
we don't care.
I don't care what happens to most people.
No, well, you drive you crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't take that on your shoulders. It'll eat you up.
I got certain family members who I still, would really like. Not holding out hope, but I hope they come around eventually. But
yep, all of us
them, I don't try and convert.
All of us have invested our own money and sharing what Yahweh had to say, creating the web presence. We've invested our time and our money to share what Yahweh has conveyed. None of us claim to have any personal revelation. None of us.
No.
We do not claim that we were uniquely inspired or given unique secrets. We all say, this is what God said. That text is available to everyone who wishes to consider it. And all we're doing is conveying what he has already told us as completely, as accurately, as passionately as we possibly can. And we do not ask anybody to give us anything. We do not accept donations. We do not do this for the money. We could care less about money. But we care what's valuable is what Yahweh has said. The single most valuable thing in the entire universe is the Torah. Yahweh's guidance to the very humans he created.
I will say, as a group, we have come to several, what I would say, very unique conclusions, things I've not found anyone else talking about or speaking about.
Hundreds of them.
But that's all based on our observation and our study of the Torah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the only thing you
to say, for example, we've come to the conclusion that the Ruach Kodesh is the maternal, feminine manifestation of Yahweh's nature, is simply based upon what the Hebrew text says and how it says it. It's not based upon
it's not a personal revelation. We're not saying God told me this and wants me to share this with the world. We're saying this is what God said in his Torah.
Okay. God presents
here's where he says
conditions.
Here's how I can prove it.
Right. God
speaking of corruption,
conditions for participation
speaking
in the covenant
of
to Abraham. We're not making them up. They're not our terms and conditions. These are the 5 terms and conditions he presented to Abraham that Abraham accepted to become part of the covenant family. We did not get a personal invitation or announcement from God that says, my name is Yahweh. No, what we did is we looked at the 4 letters and we looked at the most popular, commonly repeated Hebrew words that contain those same letters, like Torah, and came to the conclusion, like Shalom, that the Yod He Wah He are pronounced Yahweh. And then beyond that, we looked at every single Hebrew word that contained those letters. And by evaluating every Hebrew word that contained those letters, came to the conclusion that Yahweh's name was based on the verb Haya, just as he says it is, and that therefore it is pronounced Yahweh. We took the time to look at what he said because we were interested in what he had to say.
Well,
and
you have
say.
Geniuses out there that want to brush over the fact that Yahweh's name is written in his covenant writings exactly 7,000 times, and they go to Haya as Yahweh's name. Now Haya means existence, and it is the basis for Yahweh's name.
But it isn't his name.
But if you continue past what he was saying is, look, I really exist. That's what he was saying to Moshe.
Well, he answered the most important question first. when he talked
Yeah,
about
yeah. And then he went on to state and go back and tell the children of Yisrael that my name is Yahweh.
Yahweh, your God.
Right.
And
God
right
of
now,
your
it's on
fathers.
every single manuscript or papyrus or whatever out there,
wherever you find it is there.
that's extant.
Yeah.
It says Yahowah. It does not say Haya. Okay?
No.
So
it's real simple. God gave
but there are
his
people out there that
revelation
think they have
to
a
the
secret.
world. All
Yeah.
we have done is choose to study it. We've chosen to study it as
and
a group
be
because we
rational
can
while
gain
we
more
study
and learn
it.
more from it
Right.
as a group. But all we have done is choose to study what he gave to the whole world. Everybody out there has access to what we have access to. We've just chosen to sit down as a group and study it.
Correct.
And we've drawn
And
conclusions based
when
on
we're
that
talking
study.
about Yahweh's name and the people that will have that don't want to use it, and they prefer God, which is not a name; it's just a word. And then there's those that say, well, we can't use God because that's the name of a pagan god. What was the name of the prophet that Yahweh specifically chose to communicate? Yeah. To David when David was going through his rough patch. Yeah, his name was GD.
Yeah, and I believe that was the name of one of the tribes of Yisrael, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I know.
Come on, folks.
He does talk about Lord, and not to call him Lord.
Consistent.
He says that over and over and over and over and over again.
Well, you've got to use Elohim. Well, doesn't Yahweh use Elohim also to describe false gods?
Of course it does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
I've got
Yahweh
two
tries to
places.
do when he says don't mention the name of false gods is to say don't proclaim them as if they were real. Don't use Jesus Christ. Don't use Allah. My name is Yahweh. If you want to talk about me, use my name.
I do use those names, but I use them as pejoratives.
Well, I do too.
You know.
And so,
it's
by the way,
perfectly fine to use them
does
to
Yahweh
condemn
speak of Astarte?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a very negative term.
Right. Does
Ashura.
he speak of Lord Baal? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
he is not violating his own terms and conditions. When he does so, he's using those names to point out that they're false. And we can too, and we should too. It's important that we think this through, and we're consistent, and we make our perspective as similar as we can to Yahweh's, and to make our terminology as consistent. The fellow that I used to write with, who I dearly love, just a wonderful guy. We finally broke on, separated on Paul. He wanted to cling to Paul, and I recognized that Yahweh was abundantly clear that Paul is the plague of death. But that he said, you've accused me of making a religion of words. And my goal is to have my vocabulary, my presentation of ideas regarding God be as consistent to Yahweh's as is possible. And so I am devoted to the idea of conveying what Yahweh has to say as consistently as possible with the nomenclature that he chose to use. Now, to do that, the most important words I'm going to convey in both Hebrew and in English. If I only convey them in Hebrew, I'm not communicating in the language, the primary language of humankind. Doesn't do any good unless I'm going to convey it also in English. But if you don't share the Hebrew root so that you understand this is the full meaning of this word and how you come to know it, then there's no justification, no explanation, no way to learn why we've chosen those English renderings of it. Why mikra means to invite, to call out. What call out means, to be called out. Why the term mikra was used to encourage us to read and recite his testimony. What an invitation. Why Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim are invitations to a party. And what should you do if you're being invited to a party where the parting gifts are eternal life, perfection, becoming adopted into the Creator's family, being empowered and enriched. If those are the parting gifts, and you're invited to attend these, to receive these gifts at no cost to you whatsoever, what should you do relative to those invitations? Yeah, respond.
Answer and respond.
Answer and respond, which is what Yahweh says, Anna, to answer and respond. Exactly.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about corruptions. I walked into a fairly high-tech mall the other day. So, you know, something I don't really do a lot, just because of it's so hard for the movement for me at this point.
Yeah.
And there was a store called Kirk Miller's High-Tech IT.
You making that up?
Like, what in the hell?
You gotta love irony.
Then I realized I was just in the Twilight Zone.
Well, you had really the Twilight Zone, because our friend Kirk is artistic.
Take a picture.
I go to get these downloads, and they're always handwritten. If they come from Kirk,
highly
they're
functional
individual,
but he is not high tech.
No.
Hey, I gotta say, I finally got all of his notes posted up on the site, and actually, I just literally embedded the PDF into the site. The yellow background and handwriting, it looks really good. It actually looks very nice on the website. I like it. I was going to transcribe it, but I'm just
I didn't know it was ever going to be seen. So.
Oh no, it's really good. Yeah, you're.
Oh, you got way better handwriting than me. Trust me.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of your
IT department.
Yeah, is that you can put in the Hebrew letters right in the middle of your text. Yeah, I like that.
That's where all my notes are.
I personally like it, and so
I throw in one other thing about the interlinear is that you have to have, and that someone like what I use is I don't, one thing Strong's did that was so brilliant. He gave every word a number.
Yeah.
And when you look at your translations, like if you say, okay, we're going to talk about such and such, such and such, and I want to look it up.
Yeah.
The way you might spell it phonetically may not be the same as you might find in these interlinear. So as long as I have a number, that's the one thing I do is I go back and I look at all the numbers, and then I can look up that in 10 different lexicons.
Yeah, although there are lexicons that use other numbering systems.
Oh, I know.
And my
I
have
about 2/3, or probably about 20% of what I have on my shelf doesn't, so I have to look it up the hard way with a modern Hebrew
does not use the Strong's numbers. The reason I very seldom, other than words like Torah, or words like the chaya, the word that is misrepresented as worship, from Make a Declaration About Life. There are words that I will provide the Strong's numbers so that you can direct people to, this is how this was perverted, and this is how you know that it was perverted.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I don't like referencing Strong's, although I use Strong's.
Well, I don't want to. It's not an endorsement of that. It's just
because
you have a
I don't want to endorse Strong's,
and
B is that there is only one. I mean, I understand that the numbering system has value because it's a way of